Larry, it seems like the nation is captivated with trials, whether it's the Arbery trial, the Rittenhouse trial, all the January 6th defendants. Royce Lamberth handed down a sentence yesterday. Welcome back to the Citizens Grand Jury.
Thank you, Jason. Yes, it just gets worse and worse when the best judge on that court, and I used to have a lot of high regard for Judge Lamberth. I still do as a person, but not anymore, frankly, as a federal judge. He's changed. He's changed over the years. He's better than the rest, but that's not saying much. And I did a podcast this morning, which we're going to play shortly, which I actually sent to him. And I said, Royce, please take this to heart. I don't have any cases with him currently, so I can do that. I said, I still wish you well, but take this to heart, because he's probably the one judge on that court that has any degree of integrity. The rest of them have none. And, I've been there for 45 years, so I know, and it comes to these political matters. But yes, Judge Lamberth sentenced the so-called QAnon Shaman, who was not violent going into the Capitol on January 6th. He had this crazy headdress, which you can see Judge Lamberth is wearing there, where it's a little bit of a satire and a parody. And he basically was sentenced to 41 months in prison because of his high-profile nature, to send a message to others. Now, we know that the January 6th uprising, I don't call it an insurrection, in my view, I've said this many times, was the result of the rank corruption in government that the people began to understand in greater detail. As Jefferson said, they would eventually rise up again, wage another revolution. He said, what's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? That's the natural manure of government. He didn't want anybody hurt, neither do I. We don't advocate violence at all. We advocate peaceful and legal measures. But, when people reach a boiling point, this was the least that you could have expected. And when they saw that Trump's own Supreme Court justices wouldn't even hear his case, a well-filed case by the Attorney General of Texas over election irregularities, if not fraud, this is what you get. And to send a message, to put this guy in prison for 41 months, I'm going to play, in fact, we're going to show an NPR article first, then we're going to play my podcast, because it says it all, podcast of today, which is out there right now, which I sent to Judge Lamberth. When you do that kind of thing, because you want to send a message, this guy's going to be in prison, for over 3 years, for 3.5 years. During that time, he could be raped, he could be murdered, God knows what. And these judges are going to be sitting in their house watching Fox News, having a good time, or MSNBC, or the Communist News Network, CNN, and living a life. And basically all this guy did was trespass, and that's not, 41 months is not appropriate. And one can make an argument it isn't a trespass because the Capitol belongs to the people of the United States. So this is way out of control. After we play this, I'm going to go through some of the other judges. There are at least 13 of them. And they appear to have all gotten together, probably in a lunchroom or some conference room. And they said, well, we don't think the Biden-Harris Justice Department is charging with enough. We want felonies. The Chief Judge Burl Howell has said that. We don't want just misdemeanors, trespass, and that kind of thing. So we're going to sentence these people to prison. And that's what they're doing increasingly just in the last few months. We'll talk about that in greater detail. But this is the story in NPR. I picked a leftist publication to show it. And even this story admits that the Shaman was not violent, okay? And you didn't slug anybody, but you were there actually obstructing the functioning of the whole government. You know what you did was wrong. I admire you for being able to come to terms. And what they're doing here is Lamberth and the rest. It reminds you of a trial in Iran or North Korea or in Cuba, where defendants are having to confess to crimes they didn't commit, in effect. They're getting down on their knees. They're saying, oh, I did wrong. I'll never do it again. The Shaman did that too. Thank you, Judge Lamberth, for letting me eat organic food. It's ridiculous. And it's a forced confession in a way. And it's something that goes on in dictatorial regimes and in terrorist regimes. So we're now seeing it in this country. And then after we get through this whole discussion about the federal judges, and we are seeking indictments, and I say at the end of my podcast, we'll show more mercy to them than they've showed on the defendants of January 6th. they need to be held accountable to the same rules that we're held to, and they're violating their oath of office to the United States, not to administer the law on the basis of a person, but on the basis of the law, not to send messages, but to stick to the facts of that case. So we'll show that oath of office again after we play some videos here. I think, Jason, you had a video you wanted to show, and then I would ask that we play my podcast, okay, this morning.
Yeah, we've got some video of the shaman inside the chamber. The thing that's interesting about this video, Larry, as the judge pointed out, he's not doing violence. He's practically invited in there by the police. Let me just get everything set for us here. And
maybe as the punishment to these judges, they should be required as a sentence to wear the headdress and walk down the streets of Washington, D.C. Okay,
that's an excellent idea.
That'll be part of the sentence.
Ruled that Chansley is too dangerous to release and has to stay in jail pending his trial.
It's only a matter of time. Justice is coming.
One analyst says even though Chansley's not accused of violent behavior against others, his high profile as a symbol of the riot puts added pressure on prosecutors.
The prosecutors have to understand that the public is watching every move they make in this case. And so the notoriety of certain defendants is something they have to take into consideration, and they better make darn sure that they have charged these people appropriately and that they come away with convictions, including on Jacob Chansley.
This comes as the Washington Post reports that the U.S. Army, in the days just ahead of January 6th, pushed to deny the D.C. government's request for a National Guard deployment on the 6th. The Post...
So, Larry, is that the way things are supposed to work? Because somebody is high profile, even if they haven't committed sufficient crimes, they just get stuck in jail for 4 years?
Well, that's right. And then another judge this week, we're getting a little bit of an echo. Perhaps my assistant can close the door. Another judge this week, I think it was Carl Nichols or a judge to that effect, a Trump appointee actually, put someone away that had simply said, I'm white, a female, and I'm also blonde, and I don't think I'm going to go to prison. She was given 30 to 60 days. Okay, we'll outline it in the indictment that we're going to present because we've actually got at least 13 judges who are acting in concert to violate the constitutional rights of defendants by not meting out the law in an appropriate way without regard to who they are. It doesn't make any difference whether you're black, white, green, or yellow, or a QAnon shaman, or a woman who says she doesn't think she's going to do time because she's blonde and white. Okay, I mean, it's not a smart thing to say, but that's not a reason to give them prison time. And this particular judge, it wasn't Carl Nichols, I don't believe, but we'll check. My assistant will check that right now. But, that's whipping up racial hatred to this woman, and she's going to go to jail for 30 to 60 days, and she could possibly be raped and killed even, and someone that took offense to this judge labeling her in effect as a white racist. So this is what we're dealing with right now. And it's very, very serious. And there's so many of them that we're going to lay it out in an indictment in very, very stark terms, in accurate terms. And the judges that are going to be included in that indictment include, but are not limited to, the worst judge I've ever appeared in front of in my 45 years, a completely dishonest, politicized hack by the name of Colleen Kohler-Catelli. And then there are other judges on that bench of varying degrees of politicization, whether it's Emmett Sullivan, who used to be a good judge, he's also gone south, Carl Nichols, Randolph Moss, Trevor McFadden, Tanya Chutkin, Timothy Kelly, of course, Royce Lamberth, Burl Howe, Amy Berman Jackson, Reggie Walton, Thomas Hogan, and Dabney Friedrich. Those are 13 judges, and they're all acting in tandem. They are persecuting beyond anything which is reasonable protesters, peaceful protesters. Okay, if you busted up the place or you committed a crime, oh yeah, okay, I understand. I mean, don't over sentence here, but I understand that. But most of these people were very, very peaceful, and what they're doing is quelling dissent. They're acting like the extension of the Biden-Harris Gestapo at the Justice Department to quell dissent, not just with regard to January 6th protesters, not just with regard to investigating parents that have problems with critical race theory and teaching homosexuality, transgenderism, transsexualism in schools, pushing it on kids, telling them that it's cool, okay, that kind of thing. But sending a message to everybody that you should not question authority, government authority. Now, our founding fathers obviously questioned government authority. In fact, it was Lamberth that said at a prior arraignment of one of these defendants, quoting out of context, George Washington said he told this defendant, obey the established government. George Washington did not obey the established government. Neither did Thomas Jefferson, neither did Benjamin Franklin, neither did anybody else, any of the other founding fathers. Okay, they actually waged what was in effect a coup d'etat against the king. Now, they didn't start it, but they finished it. They just simply said, we're going to declare independence. And then the king moved on them. And we won by the grace of God with the help of the French. So this is where we are today. And it's why we have our citizens' grand juries, which is in progress right now as you watch me on the screen. It's why we have our Third Continental Congresses, where our delegates are debating if and when to declare independence. And I'm advocating that we do it and form a new government and take that government out of Washington, D.C., perhaps put it back in Philadelphia, where it all began. And, other actions that we can take. And I'm going to make some other comments when we show some of these videos here. This is very, very serious. And these federal judges are doing the bidding of the political establishment, and they are the political establishment. That's how they got their jobs. Judge Lamberth may have gotten it on merit. He was head of the civil division in the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's Office, but most of them get there through bribery, through political campaign contributions and other forms of grease and perks and promises that are being put forth by special interests and those who put them on the bench. So, Jason, let's play right now the podcast. It'll be an audio. You can show the picture that goes with the podcast of what I did this morning. And in good faith, I sent it to Judge Lamberth. I don't have any cases anymore with him at this present time. And, I'm telling him, exercise your authority, shape up here. You have to start representing the American people. This is not the country you remember when you were a young lawyer at the Justice Department. In effect, that's what I'm saying. And I'm saying, I wish you well, but, you've been critical of me over the years from time to time. I felt sometimes he wanted to distance himself during the Clinton years when I was running Judicial Watch, which I founded. And I said, okay, I never really pushed back, but, he obviously pushed at me for whatever reason. So now I'm returning the favor in a good-natured and hopefully a constructive way. I apologize for the phone that's ringing right now, but let's play this podcast and I'll see if I can shut it off.
An orthopedic surgeon can replace a damaged joint, but they
an
can't replace
advertisement
time.
that
That's
Radio
why you need a
America
surgeon who's close to home.
Puts on the podcast right before
in our
it's
fight against COVID.
broadcast.
Booster doses are now thanks.
Today, Freedom Watch is reconvening its citizens' grand juries, and we're going to be judging the federal judges, particularly in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia and the D.C. Circuit, and of course, the Attorney General of the United States. You use the term loosely, Merrick Garland. He was a judge, formerly a chief judge of the Circuit Court, the appellate court of that lower Washington, D.C. federal court. I practiced in that court for nearly 45 years. It's a corrupt cesspool. It's highly politicized. It's made up of establishment hacks from both political parties. And my once favorite judge, someone who I still consider to be a friend, although he may not view me this way, although I might add, he wrote several things over the many years which were not always complimentary to me. I thought that at the time that he wrote it to create some distance because we were proceeding against Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and others in that administration. But I've been critical of him of late. And perhaps the latest thing where he sentenced the so-called Shaman, the QAnon Shaman, to 41 months in prison yesterday. That Shaman didn't commit any violence. He didn't hit anybody. He didn't break anything. 41 months, he was wearing a headdress. I want you to tune into our Citizens Grand Jury this morning at freedomwatchusa.org or crowdsourcethetruth.com and watch this, because we're going to go through the various federal judges who have apparently gotten together in the lunchroom or wherever they hang out in the courthouse and decided that they were going to start throwing peaceful protesters in prison over January 6th. Now, January 6th was not just about President Trump. It was not about the so-called big lie, which it's never been proven that it was a big lie, that the election was stolen. I believe that it was. Many people believe it was stolen. But that even notwithstanding, the American people had reached a point where they saw the rank, cancerous corruption in all three branches of government. And the final straw was when President Trump's own Supreme Court justices that he used to brag about, Tony Barrett, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh, threw him under the bus along with the rest. They threw him under the bus because they wouldn't even give a hearing to the Attorney General of Texas, who brought a very well-reasoned case that the Texas voters' vote was being diluted by election irregularities in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, and Wisconsin. By the way, Wisconsin, where Kyle Rittenhouse is being tried as we speak for murder. This was not just the result of President Trump, but these judges, Democrat and Republican appointed, many not of the ethics of Judge Lamberth even, really low-class people, political hacks of the highest magnitude. And I write about it in my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, and the second version, which is coming out in February, which will augment that and bring everything up to date. But get the one that I've already written, because then you'll be able to compare it and just see how badly this country has been taken down the drain just in the last year. But these judges are establishment. By and large, they got there through political campaign contributions, the grease of lobbyists and special interests and other forms of what are in effect bribes to get them on the bench. Now, I don't know whether Judge Lamberth got there through campaign contributions or not. Probably not. He was the head of the civil division of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., before he became a federal judge. In fact, his secretary, Beverly Wilder, used to be my secretary. She used to bring me cookies from Judge Lamberth's office after I left the Justice Department and she went to work for Royce Lamberth. Now, I like Judge Lamberth, but you must have to understand that he is the product of the establishment. He spent virtually his entire career, if not his entire career, working for the government. He was, of course, a Justice Department lawyer. Now, here's the problem, is that you have to be able to exercise dissent. These people walked into the Capitol, most of them, peacefully and legally. The fact that you're wearing a shaman headdress or maybe are even associated with QAnon is not a crime. And to give someone 41 months in prison, where you can be raped, where you can be killed, and even just doing the general time, under these circumstances is unconscionable. And you have other judges in that courthouse who are giving people 30 and 60 days, Colleen Kohler-Catelli, Carl Nichols, the rest of them Trump appointees as well. Nichols is a Trump appointee. They're establishment hacks. They fear for their own lives. They know that the American people are in on it. They understand what goes on the federal bench today and judicial benches in general, that they don't represent the people. They represent the interests of those people who put them on the bench. Now, granted, in state courts, such as in Florida, judges are generally elected. They're accountable to the people. And it was Thomas Jefferson who said, our greatest founding father, I believe, in our third American president, that without ethics on the bench, because they're unelected, unaccountable to the people, thinking they're there for life, they would become despots and tyrants, causing us to shed the blood of patriots and tyrants yet again every 20 years or so. Jefferson did not want to see that happen. I don't want to see it happen. No one wants to see it happen. But as a chapter in my book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry says, tongue-in-cheek, satirically, the federal judges will be the first to be taken to the guillotines. And they know that. And that's why they're doing the bidding of the establishment, Democrat and Republican. That's why they're throwing these people in prison. They fear for their own lives, the families' lives that they have. And they should fear, but I don't want to see anything happen to them, and neither do you. But when you don't represent the interests of the American people, when you represent your own interests and that of the establishment, this is what gets you into a situation where the people created what was an uprising, not an insurrection, an uprising on January 6th. Now, here's the irony with Judge Lamberth. This is the dichotomy. This is what I have in terms of my issues with him. When I was at Judicial Watch, we had a case that we brought called Filegate. That case was brought against Hillary Clinton for obtaining over 900 FBI files from the FBI to spy on adversaries. She was a named defendant. There was no doubt that she was behind it with her butt boy aide called Craig Livingstone, ordering up those files. And I asked to take the deposition of Hillary Clinton. She was a named defendant. Lamberth protected her, wouldn't let me do it. Then there was the email scandal dealing with Hillary's first email scandal. Millions of emails, Bill Clinton too, and others in the White House hid from independent counsel Ken Starr, from me at Judicial Watch, and also Congress. And we went into a contempt hearing, a criminal contempt hearing. Nothing ever happened. No one was held accountable. Hillary Clinton was the primary suspect. He let her go. He let her go after George W. Bush was elected. I had already left Judicial Watch to run for the U.S. Senate in Florida. He let her go. Then fast forward, Judicial Watch brings the Freedom of Information Act case. I'm no longer there with Benghazi. After years, he finally gives them a right to take a deposition. It was already too little, too late, meant nothing. It was simply a Freedom of Information Act case. He did allow that. And then, of course, the D.C. Circuit reversed it. Bunch of political hacks up there as well, protecting the establishment. Now, ask yourself this question. Why should this shaman, who didn't harm anyone, get 41 months when Lamberth allows Hillary Clinton to walk free? She got into the getaway car with her hubby, Bill, Slick Willie, and drove away from the scene of the crime faster than Bonnie and Clyde. And that's what I call them, Bonnie and Clyde of American politics. This is the way the judiciary works. And even a judge like Lamberth, who allowed me to take depositions during the Judicial Watch years, who I call in my book the best of the worst, I do like Judge Lamberth, and I know he likes me, but I've got to be as critical of him as he's been of me from time to time, for whatever reason. If he's not going to step up to the plate, if he's not going to do his job, if he's going to put some guy like a shaman away for 41 months, 1 month longer than Roger Stone, who deserved the 40 months of imprisonment, given his conviction for 7 counts of perjury, for obstruction of justice, for lying to the government and witness tampering, or Paul Manafort, who got no time thanks to a pardon, or Michael Cohen, or others. This guy does 41 months and didn't harm a hair on the head of anyone. And frankly, Lamberth and the other judges are forcing these defendants to walk the plank. It looks like a trial in Iran or North Korea, where you have to confess your guilt and say you did wrong and that you're a member of the CIA or a member of some great conspiracy to get off light. That's what they're doing. And this shaman came before Lamberth and got down on his knees and begged, I know I was wrong. I know I did wrong. You know what? He didn't do any wrong, and neither did the other peaceful protesters. That's our house. That's our capital. And if it's a trespass, it may be justified. Thomas Jefferson would have been the first in the Capitol on January 6th, the first. And he would have done a lot more than having the crazy headdress of a shaman. Believe me, he would have. So tune in to our Citizens Grand Jury today. We're seeking the indictment of these federal judges, and we will try them. We'll be more merciful towards them than Lamberth was towards the shaman and towards the others are to the other peaceful protesters. But I'll tell you something. Without a judiciary that will stand in the stead for the American people, we are in a revolutionary mode. They protect themselves. They protect the people that got them their jobs on the bench. They do not protect the American people by and large. And that's the problem. And that's why I wrote the book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, and get it at freedomwatchusa.org. Read it carefully. And it's why we have Third Continental Congresses in addition to our citizens' grand juries. We need to declare independence. We need a new government. We need judges who are accountable to the people who are elected, not appointed through political campaign contributions and other forms of grease. This is where we are, fellow patriots. Rise up, get up off the couch, turn off Sean Hannity, get to work, and let's save this country. That's my message for today. I'll be back tomorrow with another special podcast. Until then, remember the Father and Son will only help us if we help ourselves. Thank you for listening to me.
Well said, Larry.
There you have it. I mean, this reminds me, and also things that we're going to talk about later, of a quotation of Woody Allen, tongue in cheek, although it's not funny what's happening here, in that film Bananas that he did early on in his career, where he said, it's a travesty of a mockery, of two mockeries of a sham. I moved for a mistrial. Remind you of Kyle Rittenhouse? I moved for a mistrial. Do you realize there's not a single homosexual in that jury? Okay. So this is the mockery that's being made. By the way, the movie had nothing to do with homosexuals. He was using that as humor, the absurdity of it. But this is where we are today. I mean, it's so tragic that even this humorous quip by Woody Allen rings true. And when you couple that with what's going on at the Justice Department, being used as a Gestapo to quell all dissent, to threaten Americans with lists that you're a domestic white terrorist and this and that. And when the judges and when the executive branch, the deep state, the Biden-Harris Gestapo, and then Congress, which by and large are a bunch of court jesters, fools, and criminals stuffing money into their pockets. And if you're a Republican, doing little to nothing on behalf of the American people. And if you're a Democrat, infested by the devil or actually trying to destroy the country, this is where we are. So you can expect people to get upset. You can expect them to go to the Capitol. You can expect them to walk in to their Capitol. And in my view, it's not even a trespass. But yeah, if you do something, you break something up or hurt somebody, that's another thing. But there was very little of that. And most of the people that were there because they had a sincere belief, including police, including military, including others, that this country was going down the drain and that they had been left behind. Now let's shift and let's talk about the so-called, because to me, the guy doesn't qualify as an attorney general of the United States. He's simply a criminal. Merrick Garland, the current so-called attorney general of the United States. He previously testified to Congress that parents were not being investigated, intimidated, threatened by his FBI. The FBI is obviously part of the Justice Department. It's a subpart that he controls ultimately. You have Christopher Wray beneath him, and Christopher Wray is basically just a chameleon who does what he's told to do. In fact, to use another Woody Allen analogy, he's like Zelig. He takes on the shape and form of anyone who happens to be president of the United States at the time, or his superior, in which case it was James Comey a while back. But let's take a look at an interview that was given, at least a presentation by Laura Ingraham on Fox News, where she brings in Jim Jordan, who comes on with his rolled up sleeves and pretending that he's going to do something. It's all talk. The Republicans are nothing but talk. They don't do anything, and that's why it really doesn't matter that they may take over the House of Representatives or the Senate, and they think they're going to win the presidency. Forget that with our corrupt electoral system on the national level. It really doesn't matter. As I've said before, Hillary Clinton's quote, which was totally inappropriate, disgusting, and abhorrent with regard to Benghazi, what difference does it make, ironically rings true when it comes to the Republican Party. They're absolutely worthless. And when you see Jim Jordan and people like him, whether it's Tom Cotton, Jim Jordan, Ted Cruz, the rest, shooting their mouth off day in and day out, and that's all they do is shoot their mouth off. You reach a point where the American people say, hey, we got to do it for ourselves because these people don't represent us, whether it's January 6th or whether it's declaring independence and forming a new government, making some fine tunes to our Constitution, removing immunity for government officials and for judges and for others that think they're above the law. This is where we are. So let's play this interview, this little piece on Laura Ingraham, which encapsulates what's been going on today. And we've now learned that Merrick Garland lied under oath to Congress, saying that Americans, parents were not being surveilled, they weren't being intimidated, they weren't being put on watch lists. And you can rest assured that while the Shaman will do 41 months, Merrick Garland will walk off scot-free, just like Hillary Clinton and the rest. So let's play this and let's talk about it, because we are seeking the indictments, not just of these federal judges, but Merrick Garland, who, not coincidentally, was the chief judge of the appellate court that sits over the lower court that Judge Lamberth and the rest of these judges preside upon.
The Justice Department supports and defends the First Amendment right of parents to complain as vociferously as they wish. I can't imagine any circumstance in which the Patriot Act would be used in the circumstances of parents complaining about their children, nor can I imagine a circumstance where they would be labeled as domestic terrorism.
Didn't you just wish that guy was on the Supreme Court? Well, new whistleblower documents reveal that one day before Attorney General Merrick Garland denied targeting concerned parents, the FBI was secretly planning to do just that. Now, on October 20th, the FBI's Criminal and Counter-Terror Division issued a memo asking agents to use a so-called threat tag to track investigations and assessments of threats specifically directed against school board administrators and other school personnel. In other words, they're spying on parents who question or criticize the dictates of far-left educrats. Well, what's truly shocking? Well, we probably would never have known any of this if an unnamed whistleblower hadn't come out, spoken out, reached out to Republicans on the House Oversight Committee. Joining me now is the committee's ranking member, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan. Now, Congressman, did the AG, was he telling the truth to Congress, or would you be willing to believe he really didn't know what was being planned by his own Justice Department at the time?
Well, he either lied to us or he doesn't know. Either one is bad for the country, bad for justice in America. Understand this, Laura, as we speak, at this moment, the FBI is, not maybe, is treating parents as terrorist threats. And the Attorney General came in front of the committee and said just the opposite. And you just played the clip. He says, I cannot imagine any circumstance where we treat parents or we give them the label of domestic terrorists. But in fact, the day before, as you pointed out, the day before, an email gets sent out to agents across this country saying just the opposite. Say spy on parents, give them this threat tag, categorize, label parents. And when I first read this memo, I thought, this is no different than what the IRS did just a few years ago when they had remember the BOLO list? Be on the lookout for these kind of organizations using these kind of words. And they had a list of American citizens just like the FBI is doing now. So he either didn't know, which is terrible, or he misled the committee when he came in front of us, and we need to have him back, plain and simple.
Well, what he said, though, is we're not criminalizing or accusing people who disagree. That's a constitutional right to disagree. We would not do that. This is about actual threats of violence. And to that you say?
Well, remember how this all started. We got to understand the timeline. September 29th, a left-wing political organization asked the President of the United States to get the FBI involved in local school board matters. 5 days later, the Attorney General does just that. October 20th, we have this email that goes out to across the nation about this threat tag. And then October 21st, he comes in front of the committee and tells us all this. October 22nd, the organization that started it all apologizes for their memo and withdraws, or excuse me, for their letter and withdraws their letter. But yet, Merrick Garland, we've asked him, will you rescind the memo? Will you stop this, what you've put in place, what you've put into action? He will not rescind it. He will not withdraw it. He will not stop it. That's the part that concerns me. And we have sent now countless letters. We've lettered to the FBI, back to Merrick Garland, to the School Board Association, to the Education Department, all these entities. We've sent letters. We need answers because it sure looks like, I think without a doubt, this is happening. They are targeting moms and dads across this country for simply speaking out and saying, we don't want this racist, hate America curriculum taught to our kids. Imagine that.
Well, Congressman, it seems to me that with the midterms coming up, and by the looks of it, it's going to be a Republican wipeout of the Democrats, they see that this issue is a potent one. And do you agree that the goal here is to intimidate parents against showing up and getting involved across the country? So this is like wildfire. It's catching on. They don't want it to happen.
Yeah, they're trying to chill First Amendment free speech. This is all about intimidating parents. But one thing I know, one thing you know, Laura, you're not going to intimidate moms and dads. No high-paid lobbyist, no bureaucrat ever beats a mom on a mission. The moms are fired up. And here's the great thing. Courage is contagious. We saw it in Virginia. One mom stands up, one dad stands up. Pretty soon it's a whole community, and they're saying, not with my kids. That is what is so wrong about this. And you're exactly right. The idea that this guy, Merrick Garland, was the smartest man on the planet, had to be on the Supreme Court, is such a crock. And the American people see. We saw him testify in front of our committee 3 weeks ago. He didn't even know there was a press release that accompanied his memo on October 4th, and that press release talked about getting the National Security Division, the Counterterrorism Division, involved in this effort. That is frightening. He didn't even know it, or if he did know it and misled us, that's even more wrong. So he better come back in front of our committee and be willing to answer some tough questions about this, and he should stop this process right now.
Do you think the Biden White House is putting undue influence on the Justice Department here for political reasons? That's a serious charge, because Psaki today said that's not happening. It's independent. They're independent. They're totally different from Trump. That's what her big point was today. Your reaction
Of course
to that?
they are. We now have press reports that the White House talked with the School Board Association before the initial September 29th letter was ever sent. We know that when President Biden goes out and criticizes the pro-life law in Texas, 8 days later, the Justice Department brings suit. We know that when President Biden went out and criticized the Georgia election law changes, a few weeks later, what happened? The Department of Justice, the Garland Justice Department, goes out and brings suit. And we know what happened here. A letter on the 29th that the White House coordinated with a left-wing political organization. 5 days later, they do exactly what this left-wing political organization asked for, and we find out now they're treating parents as domestic terrorists, when in fact the Attorney General told us just the opposite. Of course they're political. Anyone with half a brain can see that.
Yeah, what is it called? A terror tag or something like that? I mean, it's just,
well, it's called a threat tag, but you're right. It's a terrorist tag. That's right. It's a terrorist tag. That's exactly. It's called a threat tag, but it, in point of fact, is a domestic terrorist tag, is what they're putting on moms and dads, for goodness sake.
Congressman, thank you so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox
Sean
News
Hannity's,
YouTube.
Picture off the screen. It's not comforting.
Sorry.
Okay,
I got it.
Let's. This interview is very, very revealing. It shows the symbiotic relationship of the Republicans and Fox News. Okay, Fox News wants to boost ratings. Okay, they want advertising dollars. They bring on somebody like Jim Jordan. I'm tired of listening to the guy as much as I'm tired of listening to Hannity. Rolled up sleeves. Never saw the guy in a sport jacket or a suit or anything, like he's the wrestling coach of Ohio State, which he was. Create the impression that he's actually doing something. But listen carefully to what he said. The solution to committing perjury in front of Congress is simply to call Garland back in front of Congress. It was a Republican commercial put on by both of them to elect the Republicans. Well, again, ask yourself this question, which I say over and over again. When the Republicans had control of all three branches of government, and even when Trump was president, when they had control of the Justice Department, who did they hold accountable? No one. Now, even John Durham today is just going after some lower level people to say he can justify how much money he spent. But Hillary Clinton hasn't been charged with anything. So this is exactly what Woody Allen said. You know, it's a travesty of a mockery, of two mockeries of a sham. I move for a mistrial. Do you realize there's not a single homosexual on the jury? Okay. I might add, there's not a single person like Jim Jordan who will ever do anything on the jury. It's just all for show. It's not for dough. And to crow about the fact that the Republicans may get control of the House and the Senate again, what difference does it make? It makes no difference. They don't do anything anyway. They're part of that establishment. And that's the reason for being for our citizens' grand juries. It's the reason for being for our Third Continental Congresses to declare independence, the reason why we need to form a new government with people who aren't just a road show. They're not carnival barkers like Jim Jordan or Tom Cotton, who comes on threatening the Chinese all the time, you know, peering at us like, you know, he's a giraffe, you know, eating foliage at a zoo. I mean, it's to the point where it's so ridiculous to even consider these people serious. They're simply raising money for themselves to get reelected. And that's why we need to do what we need to do with regard to Garland, with regard to the judges. The American people have had it. And to go full circle, if someone simply wears a crazy headdress and is a shaman and gets 41 months, and these people walk off scot-free like Merrick Garland or the Clintons or the Obamas or the, for that matter, Mitch McConnell's, who takes money under the table from communist China laundered through his wife's family, Elaine Chao. I can go on and on and on. The American people need to use whatever peaceful and legal means they have to bring about justice, to form a new government, to get judges who will do their job. Now, if you would, throw up, not literally, obviously, although I do feel like throwing up watching all of this, throw up the oath of office that federal judges take under oath. Throw it up on the screen if you would. We put it up in the last grand jury session. This is what they violate. And I would maintain violating this in and of itself is a criminal act because it's under oath.
Here it is, Larry.
Each justice or judge of the United States shall take the following oath or affirmation before performing the duties of his office. I, Royce Lamberth, Amy Berman Jackson, Colin Kohler-Telly, whoever you want to put in there, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will administer justice without respect to persons, without respect to persons, and do equal right to the poor and to the rich, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon me as a federal judge under the U.S. Constitution and laws of the United States, so help me God. Violate that, you've committed a crime because you swore to it under oath. They're not doing it. You know, in the famous TV miniseries, John Adams gets up in front of the Continental Congress, the Second Continental Congress, and he says, a very moving scene, I'm going to send it out later today, where we are to be a nation of laws and not men. And then he says, I want freedom. I want a new nation. I want laws and not men. Because the founding fathers were living under a king that was not meting out the law neutrally to the American people, but with regard to people in the colonies that resisted him, that rose up against him. And it's worse today because King George III, as I've also said many times, was not a socialist. He was not a communist. He was not an atheist. He was not a radical black. He was not a radical Muslim. He was not a radical member of the Marxian Jewish left. He was not a radical gay, lesbian, or transgender or transsexual. He was not a radical atheist. His shtick, to put it in Yiddish, was simply to raise more money, to taxes, overtaxes, to pay for the rest of his empire. And when we rebelled with the Boston Tea Party or Lexington and Concord or whatever, then he cracked down and tried to take our guns away from us, giving rise to the Second Amendment and right to commission militias. And he also took our legal system away from us, our criminal justice system, and took it back to London, England, with the Court of St. James. And when we tried to reason with the king, our founding fathers, over and over and over again, it's referred to in the Declaration of Independence. And that's why they wrote, when a long series of usurpations and abuses go unanswered, we have no choice, I'm paraphrasing, but to declare independence. And they invoked the divine providence to do it. And they said that they were, pledging their honor and their fortunes and risking their lives to form a new nation as one nation under God. We are far worse off today than we were under King George III. As I've said also, bring back King George III. He was Mother Teresa compared to the people that are in control of our country. So when you have judges, and Merrick Garland was a judge, or attorneys general such as this, who subvert the rule of law, the will of the people, who favor their own establishment class, who favor the elite, who favor the rich, who favor the well politically connected, frankly, who favor the people who stuff money into their pockets, because it does happen. This is what you get. And we have no defense to the tyranny of the federal government in particular today. And as Jefferson also said, when the people fear the government, there's tyranny, but when the government fears the people, there's liberty. And these judges fear the people, which is why they're sending these messages. Throw somebody in prison for 41 months, throw them in prison for 30 to 60 days because they bragged that they were white, okay? I can assure you if that woman had been black, she wouldn't have been put in prison for 30 to 60 days in front of a black judge. And then there was, this is the most remarkable thing. The judges are even fighting with each other on the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. There's no honor among thieves, so to speak. Trevor McFadden, a Trump-appointed judge, very dishonest Trump judge that we had, Laura Loomer and I, in our case involving big tech, where we brought an antitrust suit, which he dismissed out of hand. I've had other instances with him. He's not much different than anybody else, a Trump judge. He, in a sentencing at one of these peaceful protesters, asked the Justice Department, he says, I'm going to sentence this person and I'm going to send a message, I'm paraphrasing, but I want to know why you haven't done anything with regard to Black Lives Matter and others that busted up this country and maimed people and killed people over the last few years. And the Justice Department under Biden-Harris had no response. They didn't respond. Fast forward a week or so, this very radical Black judge, got all the accoutrements of office, went to the finest law schools, undergraduate schools, got herself jobs with big Washington law firms, Democrat law firms, Obama appointed, Tanya Chutkan. I've had her in one of my own cases, dishonest to the core on the level of Catelli. And so then she goes after McFadden on the bench. She goes after him, chastising him, a white Irish guy, by, it doesn't use his name, but it was clear what he was talking about. What she was talking about, everybody, because he had the nerve to question equal justice, that radical Blacks should be treated the same way as everybody else. So here's where we are today. And it's why we need citizens' grand juries. And it's why we need to declare independence. It's why we need to move on. Leave these people in the wake. We don't need them. Our founding fathers did not need the king. And these people are far worse than the king. And when you have judges rubber stamping the tyranny of the federal government, whether it's, in this instance or in other instances, like you saw with the Bundys, where I defended the Bundys in several matters. Ultimately, it turned out well, but by the grace of God, but put them through 2 years of being in prison, sometimes in solitary confinement. And they were innocent of all alleged crimes. You see the situation we're in. And the American people are beginning to understand that. And that's what gave rise to January 6th. But many of them are just sitting around watching TV, drinking scotch and soda, going out to play tennis or golf, or thinking it's all going to go away. It's not going to go away. It's only getting worse. And if you think that the Republican Party is your savior, okay, you only have one savior. And if you're a Christian, or like me, Jewish and Christian, it happens to be Jesus Christ, then you think somebody else is going to come in and save you? No, but neither Jesus nor the Father are going to do anything if we sit there and do nothing and think that this is just a passing fad. And if you think the Republican Party, the past is a prologue, it's on the front of the archives in Washington, D.C., ironically, past is a prologue. If you think they're going to save us, you can forget it. You can pack it in, go to live in some island, desert island somewhere, and get the heck out of here. Because frankly, this place is already a hellhole. It's only going to get worse. And without federal judges and a Justice Department that stand in the stead for the American people, we are in a revolutionary mode. I suggest peaceful and legal means to try to resolve it. But if we can't resolve it that way, there are others in this country who will probably do it in a different way. And I think that the military at this point, having been defiled, having been dishonored, disrespected, hung out to dry in political wars, losing all these people, and then to see how they were abandoned and our allies were abandoned and 13 were killed, on top of a drone strike ordered by the President of the United States that killed 7 innocent children, among other people who were our allies. When they see something like that, you're in a flashpoint. And while I don't advocate, it wouldn't surprise me if the military told Biden and Harris and the rest of them it's time to leave at some point. But when we do get convictions, and I'm convinced that we will, they will have a legal means to carry out those sentences, whether it's the police or whether it's the military or whoever. And I hope that we can do it peacefully and legally. That's my goal. And I hope that's your goal, because we don't want to see a bloodbath in this country. But that's where we're headed. If you just sit around watching TV right now saying, okay, the Republicans will do it. I know people have told me that, Larry. Why are you at the age of 70 still doing this? Why are you look like you're upset most of the time I see you. Why are you so intense? And those kinds of statements roll off my back like water off of a duck's you know what, because those people who think the Republicans are going to save them are not only naive, they're stupid. But that's where we are. And it's time for people to rise up. I thank our citizens' grand juries who are sticking their neck out. I thank the people of the Third Continental Congress. I thank Jason Goodman, who is fearless. I thank others in and around us that are doing what we can do peacefully and legally to bring about change. No one wants to harm a judge. No one wants to threaten a judge, but they need to be held under the same legal standards that they seek to hold us. And when a person who I held in such high regard as Royce Lamberth will let Hillary Clinton walk off scot-free, not even allow for a deposition in the Filegate case when she clearly was implicated, but yet will give a guy that wears a crazy headdress 41 months, you know something is really effed up, excuse the French, more than effed up. That's my piece for today, Jason. We will be presenting in the next few weeks a very detailed indictment against these judges, and we'll be presenting that to the Citizens Grand Jury, and we will doing one as well against Merrick Garland. And then in January, late January, we already have a judge. We're going to be trying Joe Biden, he's number one, Hunter Biden, James Biden, for the massive bribery racketeering scheme, taking money laundered through Hunter from communist China, Ukraine, and Russia, and the negligent homicide that Joe Biden committed in Afghanistan. That's number one. And we will try him. We will seek convictions. We will sentence once we get convictions. I'm convinced we will. And then we will ask the police and military to carry it out because they've had it too. And we don't want to harm anybody, but yes, we have rights as the people of the United States. We have rights as set forth in our Declaration of Independence, as set forth in our Constitution. We'll be fine-tuning that in our Third Continental Congress, take immunity away from government officials and judges and things like that, making clear there's a right to life in our Constitution, that kind of thing. But we have rights, and it's been taken away from us at this point in time. That's my piece.
Now, Larry, I get a lot of excellent presentation today, very well said. I get a lot of messages from our viewers curious about the process of impeaching judges. It seems we're in a mode where presidential impeachments are as easy to come by as, Netflix binge watching, but it's very difficult to impeach a federal judge, isn't it?
Let me back up here. We've never had an impeachment and conviction in the history of this country in 245 years. That's one of the fine tunes that we have to make in the Constitution, much less judges. I mean, 8 judges have been impeached in 245 years, one every 32 years. Now, you can't tell me that more judges haven't taken bribes during that period or committed some other illegal act. The FBI does not want to get into it because they depend on the judges for convictions or for not going against them. But impeachment is not a viable option. It does not remove presidents. It never has, never will. You have to get 2/3 in the Senate, and that's impossible. We've seen that on several occasions. So yes, when we fine-tune the Constitution, I would recommend either a recall provision or to go to a modified parliamentary system, such as they have in some other countries, where a vote of no confidence will get rid of the president. Can you imagine having to exist 3.5 more years with Joe Biden as president? Even the Democrats are trying to get rid of him now because he's dragging them down the drain. They're trying to get rid of him and Kamala Harris and Pelosi to boot. There probably will be a purge within the Democratic Party at some point. But no, they're not going to go peacefully or legally. They're not going to do that. So, I'm trying to find a way to do that legally. And therefore, we do need to fine tune the Constitution and make some changes because over time it hasn't worked. It was our second American president who said that without ethics, morality, and religion, there will John Adams, there will not be a lasting liberty. It doesn't matter what form of government you have. When you have people running that government who are corrupt, what difference does it make what the form of government is? So therefore, we need to form a new government. We need to put people up for president, for cabinet ministries, for others who have integrity. And there are some out there who have been victimized by the corruption of both major political parties. I might add, in the Democrat side, Tulsi Gabbard may be one of them. Very articulate, or Michelle Bachmann, or Sarah Palin. These people were thrown out of their party, in effect, because they spoke the truth and stood up for something. These people may be available. Governor DeSantis, I think, is doing a good job in Florida. I'm starting a new political party, a separate organization, the American Independence Party. And we're going to invite him to join our party because he's certainly going to be stabbed in the back by the Republicans. It's already happening. Roger Stone's already threatening him, not to run against Trump. And I love President Trump. He did a great job. But you know what? We need new blood right now. We do. We need to move on and thank him for what he did. But let's find someone of the stature of Ronald Reagan, who was the greatest American president, in my opinion, in our lifetime. Let's find somebody. Let's find somebody who has integrity to run a Justice Department or Ministry of Justice. Even under Trump, Sessions and Barr, they didn't have it. They buried their head in the sand, did nothing. It's futile to try to reform a government which is in a stage 4 cancerous state, which is collapsing under its own weight. And our foreign adversaries, Jason, are seeing this. We're about ready to have a potential war in the Ukraine with Soviet Union. They see that Biden is weak and the American people are fragmented and fighting among themselves. China's about ready to invade Taiwan. They've been wanting to do that for a very long time. It's a real crisis. And if you don't recognize that, and if you think, okay, let's just let the Republicans do it, you could care less about your kids, grandkids, and future generations. It's time for the American people to rise up themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you're raising a lot of really important concerns, Larry. Perhaps people are being distracted by some of the other things that are going on and not able to focus their attention on some of these bigger issues. There's been a lot of discussion about what's been called a feud between, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. People have been speculating that Joe Biden may replace Kamala Harris with someone. They've been talking about Stacey Abrams. They've been talking about Pete Buttigieg. They've been talking about Michelle Obama. What's the legality of replacing a vice president when she hasn't?
This is why you can't depend on the Democrats or the Republicans. So Stacey Abrams is just a very hateful person. Okay, she's not even ready for prime time. Pete Buttigieg took 2 months off and took a picture of himself in bed with his so-called wife, a man, with 2 surrogate kids as if they had just given birth. I mean, this guy, excuse the French, it's a freak show. Okay, I mean, it's beyond. Put that picture up. This is the guy you want as vice president, who took 2 months off as our transportation system's collapsing and the supply chain is totally impaired, and then pretends that his surrogate wife, who's a man, just gave birth to kids. Put that up on the screen. I mean, that's sick. That is totally sick. Whether you're gay, lesbian, or transgender, you deserve the right to lead your life, in my opinion. Do your own thing, okay? Don't push it on other people. Don't push it on kids. Don't teach them that that's normal. Don't teach them that it's okay if you want to be a transsexual, you get a free operation under Obamacare. If you come back from school and you say, hey, that's neat. This is what we're teaching. This is the example you want as a vice president. This guy's he's not even a bad joke. So, this is where we are today. It's unreal.
What can you say, Larry, specifically about the legal aspects of replacing a vice president who hasn't died or been accused of a crime?
It can be done. Look, even though Spiro Agnew under Nixon hadn't yet been convicted for bribes, he was taking perks. He was the governor of Maryland. He became Nixon's vice president. Nixon did replace him, or maybe it was Ford, as I might remember, after Nixon resigned. You can replace somebody at will, basically. You have to get the approval of your party to do it, but they will follow what the president wants. But to say Stacey Abrams and Pete Buttigieg, I mean, my God, that's why we need a new government. We need new political parties. We need competition. And, I'm setting that party up now as we speak. And not just that one, we need other political parties too. We need competition. And that's what really gets under my skin. I watch all the networks and I read a lot of media, and it's either Democrat or Republican. And then you see people come on Fox News like Lawrence Jones this morning. Well, I was a Democrat, but I became a Republican. Who cares, Lawrence? I mean, you're a bright guy. Fine. You don't have to join the Republican Party for what you believe in. The Republican Party believes in nothing. It's worthless. It's a fundraising machine. Many of the people out there that are watching this podcast or broadcast see how many emails they get every day. I got one yesterday, if you can believe it or not. I don't know if it was fraudulent or not, purporting to be from the Trump campaign, saying I had given money to them, that it didn't go through. I should give money again. I never gave them any money. I don't give politicians money. Okay?
That sounds like a phishing scam, Larry.
Give your money to churches and synagogues and people that actually do something. And Trump doesn't need money. He's worth over $8 billion, he says. Why are you giving him money when the American people need money? It's an affront.
I think a lot of people, Larry, are also very interested in some of the legal insights you might be able to share with us regarding Steve Bannon's response to this indictment for contempt of Congress. What can you say about that?
Well, he wants PR. He wants to be a martyr. Steve Bannon is not an honest person, and we've seen that before. But for Trump's pardon, he'd be in the deep you-know-what right now, along with pardons that were given to Roger Stone and Manafort.
But isn't this an extremely partisan display? There's a lot of people who have defied congressional subpoenas, including Eric Holder.
Well, you have to do what's in your conscience. I mean, they want no good, the Democrats in that regard. But for the fact that it's Steve Bannon, I could see, his conscientious objection to this, because there is an executive privilege with the president. He was an advisor to the president, whether he was in or outside of government. And, all the Democrats are trying to do is to wound Trump enough that he won't declare for president again. I don't believe he will, for one basic reason. The minute he declares for the presidency, he'll be indicted in a flash by these rabid leftist prosecutors in New York City. He'll be indicted for tax evasion and tax fraud, along with his sons, probably. And he'll be tied down for several years. So, right now, this teasing of Trump running for presidency, I believe it's intended to raise money for the political consultants primarily.
Fair point. But don't you think Trump's hubris will overpower any concerns that he or advisors might have about potential indictments? I think he's going to run.
Well, not when, well, he may initially, but once that happens, he's going to have to keep himself out of prison. Can you imagine being tried in front of a New York jury, New York City jury, or Washington, D.C. jury? It would be a hanging jury.
I just don't think he's done anything they're going to be able to nail to him. It's going to be like the impeachment. They'll keep trying him, and it's just going to not.
Well, Jason, you know well enough. That's what we're going through. It doesn't matter what you may think or what I may think, is that judges and juries do what they want to do. They do what they want to do.
Wind you up in the process.
Watch what happens with Kyle Rittenhouse. We haven't talked about that.
Let's talk about it.
Well, I think that there's a very good chance that Kyle Rittenhouse either gets convicted of something or there's a hung jury, basically. And this judge doesn't have the guts.
To deliberate.
Yeah, this judge doesn't have the guts to take care of business. He's hoping the jury is going to bail him out. But we're now going in to the third day here. We're in the third day, and they're obviously having difficulty. The jury instructions were incomprehensible. The judge should have simplified them. And it's not even a question of a mistrial, because making reference to Kyle Rittenhouse being, or inferring that he's guilty because he exercised his right of self-incrimination and remained silent after he was arrested, the judge should at that point have dismissed the indictment with prejudice, and that should have been it. But he doesn't want to take on the mob because, frankly, his life is at risk and that of his family. The jurors' lives are at risk. We saw what happened with MSNBC. You made reference to it. They're photographing the jurors. And so anything can happen in today's world. Just today, two people who were convicted in the death of Malcolm X after all these years were exonerated, apparently. Of course, who knows the reason for that? Maybe it's the Biden-Harris Justice Department for that one. But who knows? Who knows? You can't predict. And that's the problem. When I was a student at Duke University, which has become the Berkeley of the South, regrettably, before it became that way, I was a major in political science and French literature. I studied in France and Aix-en-Provence. And the book that influenced me the most was The Stranger by Albert Camus. Camus was an Algerian, French Algerian, and it's about a story of an Arab, an Algerian, who was tried for murder and convicted by a jury because the prosecutor put in front of the jury that he didn't cry at his mother's funeral. So therefore, he must be a bad person. That influenced me greatly. And that's what we have as a legal system today. If you're Kyle Richardson and you're sitting there, he's got to be on some kind of tranquilizers or sedative or whatever, is that you got to be scared to death right now, because this jury may react to the mob that wants blood. And when you turn on the TV and you see people like Joy Behar and others, Whoopi Goldberg, looks like she hadn't taken a bath for years. She should take time out and take a bath. I don't mean that in a racial sense either. She just looks terrible. Is that
looks like she needs to get on a treadmill.
I don't know, it's like grease dripping off her, but then there is actually, figuratively and literally. These people want Kyle Rittenhouse, a young kid, to go away for the rest of his life. They have no concern for humanity, none. These are vile, vicious, dishonest people. And those people exist on the federal bench and on other benches, and they also exist on juries. So you really can't predict what's going on. And that's why I've, for a long time, been against the death penalty, because there are so many potential mistakes that occur in court, mistakes and prejudice, and judges who have an axe to grind to kill somebody. You can't come back once you're dead. So you're going to be in heaven, but you're not going to be on this earth. In any event, our legal system is frightening. And if you're a lawyer, you know it even more than if you're not, because you lived through it.
Yeah. Well, Larry, we're going to be back next week. Actually, next Thursday is going to be Thanksgiving. I think we might pause we'll talk about that offline, but I want to make sure that people who are watching and participating in the Citizens Grand Jury visit freedomwatchusa.org. People can make tax-deductible contributions to Freedom Watch, and any amount over $50 is going to get you a gift copy of Larry's book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry, Edition 1. And I also want to remind people that they can watch simulcasts of the Citizens Grand Jury proceedings on the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. People can go onto YouTube and just search for Freedom Watch, subscribe to the Freedom Watch channel. You can also watch the Citizens Grand Jury on Rumble, rumble.com/user/CS The Truth. That's the Crowdsource the Truth Rumble channel, an excellent alternative to YouTube, where the First Amendment still remains alive. We've got to go to Canada, Larry, to exercise the First Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America through Rumble.
Well, that's right, Jason. And I think we will not convene next week. It is Thanksgiving. I think people should use their time to pray to God, whether you're Jewish, Christian, or whatever, and pray that he'll give us the courage and the wisdom to rise up ourselves and to save this country from the despots who currently are in control of it, both Democrat and Republican, whether it's in the executive branch of government, the legislative branch, or in particular the federal judiciary. And this is what's terrible. And we have problems on the state court benches too, as we can see with what's going on in Wisconsin today. So this is something that the people need to think about, reflect, pray, and come up with a New Year's resolution in advance. Join what we do at Freedom Watch, our Justice League, our Citizens Grand Juries, our Third Continental Congresses, or do something else if that's not your cup of tea, but do something. Just don't think it's going to go away and it's for the Republican Party to save you, because the Republican Party right now can't even save itself. The fact that people voted for that candidate in Virginia, it wasn't a vote for the Republicans, it was a vote against Biden and Harris and Terry McAuliffe, who's a complete criminal. So Don't be deceived by what's being fed to you in Fox News these days.
Yeah, and with that, Larry, I want to thank our grand jurors and our viewers. I want to remind people they can support Crowdsource the Truth by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Have a great Thanksgiving, Larry, and all of our grand jurors and viewers. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great evening.